Great.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Chris Schock, a board member of Great Lakes Urban. And as you may know, Great Lakes Urban works to connect people and their communities across the country and strengthen their efforts to build strong, healthy, safe, and connected neighborhoods. And so our quarterly Bright Spots events like this are a way that we use to spread best practices in the neighborhood flourishing efforts by interviewing practitioners and thought leaders in the asset-based community development space. So I especially look forward to today's discussion with Réna about Fort Wayne because before I retired, I was a proud bureaucrat in a sub-regional kind of metro, and I think there's a lot of opportunity and livability in these type of cities, the big city amenities and the small town charm. So with that, I would like to introduce Eric Smith, our executive director and our moderator for today. And Eric joined us in 2020, but he's been building connected communities in Africa and Appalachia and all kinds of exotic places for more than 2 decades. So to Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you to the board for helping to organize today. Really appreciate that. And I've learned a lot from you, Chris, from over the years and all your experience. Yeah, today we're going to really, move to a conversation with Réna, and I'm so looking forward to this and have so much to learn. And Réna, you know how I feel about you, and I just think you're a superstar in this work. And I think everybody else is going to get to see that today, why that is. But a couple of detailed things to get started with this conversation. First of all, you're going to hear us a lot of times talk about asset-based community development, or ABCD. So I just want to set the table for that. When we say ABCD, that's shorthand again for asset-based community development. It's a set of principles and practices that engender sort of inside-out, asset-based, place-centered, relationally oriented change that happens with communities and not to or for them. And the other thing I just want to note is we will transition. We'll start with my asking a few questions, and I know Réna has some presentations as well. But we will transition to a time where you can ask your questions. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, hover over your screen at the bottom, there's a little box that says Q&A. If you have questions as we go through this interview, if you would take your time and put your questions in that Q&A box, we'll know that's where we go to look to get those questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We can't always get to all of them. One question that tends to come up is that, do you record this? And yes, we are recording this, and those that are registered for this will be receiving recording to look back on. I want to say a little bit more, just briefly, with Great Lakes Urban. It's just such an honor. First of all, Réna, you should know, there's a few awards every year given to best program, best social neighborhood social activity, best infrastructure neighborhood activity that come out of a group called NUSA, or Neighborhoods USA. And Réna is a winner of this year's winner for program, best neighborhood program. But I want to mention, we're also honored to have had the fact our most recent interview was with Holland, Michigan, and the folks at the city, and also the 360 and the East Core neighborhood. And the East Core neighborhood won best neighborhood of the year under that infrastructure, physical infrastructure opportunity, for their work with the Tulip City Mural Festival. And you will have a chance. We're going to drop the link to that video in the chat. You can go back and watch that. It's a powerful story, again, of neighbors saying, this is what we think is our next step. And then, 360 providing some infrastructure support to make that vision come alive. So again, the power of working with community to make change led to this Neighborhood of the Year award. And the cool thing is, on August 28th, which is our next scheduled Bright Spots and ABCD session episode, we're going to be interviewing the great folks out of Missouri University, and the Hopeful Neighborhood Project, also Missouri-based, but works nationally. And they have a National Good Neighbor Week in Missouri, and which wraps around National Good Neighbor Day, which is September 28th. But they get over 10,000 acts of neighboring that they can document that happened in the course of that week. And so they won Neighborhood of the Program last year, and they're on a show in this coming up in August. So we're just really pleased and honored to be a part of these stories and multiple environments. And I want to say that what this means for us is we're realizing as an organization, in conversation with the board and staff, just and our stakeholders, but we are needing to evolve because to remain relevant in the many spaces we're in now. Just this year we've been in California and North Carolina, presented in Texas, so as well as Michigan, and expanding our work there. So we're going through a process, and there's going to be some announcements to make, and many of you here have spoken into this already. But there's going to be some rebranding, an update to who we are, update to some of our services. We're going to have a fireside chat where we're going to share some of what we're thinking and where we're at, and that's going to be dropped. The link to join that is going to be dropped in the chat as well. I'd love for you to join because we'll share a little bit about us, but ultimately we need your input and wisdom as well as our community to help us sift through and what is this moment that we're in? What does it really require of us as an organization in helping to spur on this movement of inside out change? So please join us at the fireside chat, give us your wisdom and insight. And hey, there's going to be a raffle. So make sure you're there in person, or at least join in. There's going to be a raffle for some really cool prizes. So you'll want to be there for that. All right. Enough about that. Now I know you're all here joining us because you know that Rena's going to knock this out of the park, and we just are so grateful that you joined us. Rena, I'm going to turn it over to you. You are a neighborhood planner for the city of Fort Wayne, but your story didn't start there, right? Your story started out east. First in Detroit and then out east, and then coming back to this work. So I'd love for you to give us a little bit of introduction and a little bit of bio. And I think you've got a presentation maybe to go with that. I am going to, as you get that started, we're going to make sure you have access to share what you need.
Got that set.
Okay.
Working on it. Hi, world. Hi, everybody. In the meantime, yes, I have the power. Check it out. All right. I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys. And that's the video you'll see in a bit. We are on Zoom. Let's go ahead and grab that guy. Slideshow from current. And it's doing that weird thing. One sec. Swap. Ta-da. And if it would start from the beginning, that'd be nice too. From beginning. So I'm going to do a really quick slideshow to tell you guys a little bit, once technology cooperates with me, about myself. And these are times. So if you see me rushing to keep up a little bit, it's because I'm trying to keep myself honest for the time. So I am Réna. My background is in architecture, studied at Howard U in Washington, D.C., and am greeting you all from Baltimore, Maryland at Project for Public Spaces Placemaking. Really quickly, from my perspective, our environments impact us. They impact our health, both mentally and physically, our behaviors, our sense of identity as individuals, and at the scale of community, that also means our health physically, mentally, et cetera, as well as our social connections and relationships. This first was really hammered into me during my stint working as an architect in DC on projects like the Fort Belvoir Community Hospital in Washington, DC, where we found, university students found that depending on where we placed our sinks, what our clientele had views of, whether or not they looked up at a stairwell or down at the floor when they came into the hospital impacted people's mortality rates, years later impacted their pain levels, and actually got them discharged from hospitals earlier or later. So if you go to a hospital, if you don't feel well, get a good view. But also it just shows how much our environments can impact us if we're there for just a few hours or even a few days. Places like Disney and casinos both know how to exploit pattern, color, sound, etc., in order to influence our behavior to make us feel like we are having the time of our lives while they extract all our cash, right? And then when it comes to place and identity, a lot of us know that we can have these inordinate senses of who we are tied to where we're from. Where we're from is usually one of the first questions people ask when they meet one another. And it can shape how people see you or how you see them. So given that, my question to myself professionally after I was working on hospitals was, how do buildings like this impact people's sense of identity? You know, this is back home in my hometown in Detroit. And when I worked for the Detroit Land Bank Authority, we took homes from looking like that to this. This is the same property in order to improve health and conditions in neighborhoods. I then, while I was doing that work, encountered the Michigan Creative Arts the Prison Creative Arts Project at the University of Michigan. This is work done by prison artists. And it humanized that population to me. And I felt like those folks and our infrastructure had some things in common. One of those being having great bones and tremendous potential, and the second being stigma. So I thought, what if we could partner those folks together? So I got some folks who had a record or who were part of that program and some architects to help change this alley from what it was to what it is here. That prison artist, Cynthia, I don't know if you can tell where I'm pointing. She has only one arm and no legs, and she still designed and painted that mural with help. So that brings to the fact that it's not always about the material we have, but our capacity to shape things and shape change. So just as much as our environments can impact us and our well-being, we in turn have the agency, have the ability to shape our environments with different kinds of assets. So after I did the housework, the house renovation work, and then like the alley renovation work at home in Detroit, I had an opportunity to come to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and work for an organization called Bridge of Grace. The slide is just a shout out to Bridge of Grace. These are their distinctives in what they do. If you want to learn more about them, visit www.bridgeofgracecmc.org, and you can get additional information about Bridge of Grace and what it is that they do. This is one of the first properties that I saw at Bridge of Grace. So same kind of situation that I was seeing in Detroit, is on a little bit of a smaller scale, which made it a bit more manageable. But Bridge of Grace focuses strongly on asset-based community development, but also, which is leveraging existing strengths and assets, but also on reframing what we can see as liabilities into opportunities for improvement. A lot of their work began with trash pickups. So this is one of those reframing instances, right? Where you see this, and more or less, we were able to take things like trash and pickups and transform by doing vacant lot cleanups, working with our police department. We were able to get our crime rate down 65% overall and our burglary rate down over 90% overall. And those slides were just illustrating that for you. And that's what I see as asset-based community development or design thinking or the scientific process, whichever you like. So really understanding what your inputs are and understanding their outcomes beyond just what you did. So the direct outcome of a trash pickup is no trash on the street. The long-term outcomes are things like improved health, improved walkability, over time, even improved mortality rates within a community. These slides are just illustrating the urgency of that need within our community. There's a lot of obesity, a lot of health issues that were leading to lower life expectancies of 20 years within our neighborhood. But being an architect and being a nerd who studies things, I realized that the American Institute of Architects said, just by designing a community well and making small interventions, you can prevent up to 90% of type 2 diabetes. You can prevent up to 50% of heart disease, 50% of stroke deaths, etc. Health benefits are most apparent among aging folks. So our retirees, which are a quickly growing population within the United States, but also in underserved communities. Just having sidewalks, people are 50% more likely to get vigorous physical exercise. The images you're seeing right now are from a vision that our community members created, because one of the things we do, or we did when I was at Bridge of Grace, I'm sure they still do, is we start with listening. So we see our community members as the greatest assets within our community. I mentioned our design thinking approach a little earlier, but we also take a disciple making approach where we walk people up a continuum of belonging, of agency and involvement as we take on our projects. And we listen to everybody, right? So even our kiddos, our 8-year-olds have something to contribute. You know, they can draw roller coasters, they can draw a pizza house across the street, they can draw flying police cars, but they can still tell us what their needs are, what they think the neighborhood needs to include or to see. This was the outcome of our listening effort. So what our community told us they envisioned, and we repeated that vision back to them visually. And then these are the projects that came out of that. So over time, we took things like tires, like pallets, et cetera, like our vacant lots, and created with our community members, with their vision, the neighborhood that it was that they wanted to live in. And all 27 houses were renovated. We installed 55 banners, et cetera. These are raw materials, community vision. These slides are pretty fast. We know that people support what they create, so we roped our kids into being the designers and builders of some of our vacant lots. Look at them working hard on getting that done and turning it into this. That was community parklet number 1. And that's us cutting the ribbon together because they earned it. And then heaven waving the ribbon, right? So that's what community ownership looks like. Beautiful projects, but also projects that make people feel like they shine more than the physical edifice itself does. This is lot number 2. Cool thing to note is that when you involve youth in projects and take them with you to Board of Zoning Appeals hearings and demonstrate their capacity to do the work with working prototypes, your projects make it 100% approval. Zoning appeals every time. A lot of communities support their kids and they support proven capacity. This is installation number 3, which is an outdoor performing arts center. These things that look like large rocks are stuccoed over tires. So I like to say people donated and delivered free of charge these raw working materials for our neighborhood. That's the Fort Wayne Ballet opening that 3rd space. And this video will play very briefly. I think it'll transition in about 5 seconds as well. I'll make it transition. And some drummers playing as well. So we have community concerts in the space every summer that are programmed by local artists and performers. And I mean, you should see some of our kiddos, the tutus they wear because they've never seen a ballerina before. Oh, now I'm back into my 5-second transitions. So things like those pocket parks grew into us being able to partner with our local parks and rec to get things like this that are breaking ground this summer. We have colorful sidewalks now, so our kids can cross more safely. Our neighborhood residents are celebrated as MVPs within the community on banners. 27 of these houses have been put up, and then Habitat for Humanity, I believe, has built another 8 or so in the neighborhood. Before, after, right? And we installed porches to create social space for our neighborhoods as well. And things like investing in families turned into a large capital campaign to provide after school or early learning programming for our youth. These are what renderings of what that space looked like. Shout out to Design Collaborative, the designer, and Wygan Construction. And that is opening up next week. So it's not just a dream, it's something that's being done. Let's see if this video plays like it's supposed to. It is not, but we have the link. Check it out. This is about a minute. Get bigger. Play. So this is the current, was actually taken about a month ago, this video. So the solar panels that you saw in the rendering are now installed on this building. Bridge of Grace's new offices are coming in. And this space is intended to be an early learning center for kids that are preschool aged. So while we have a lot of at-home daycares in our neighborhood, we don't have a lot that are able to provide support for kids 0 through 2 or 3 years of age. The facility also includes a neighborhood health clinic that will help provide developmental screening for our youth to make sure that they can get the help they need early if they indeed need that kind of help. In the slides you saw earlier about health in this presentation, you may have noticed there are currently no hospitals within the entire southeast quadrant of Fort Wayne, so this is sorely needed. All right. So from $2,500 vacant lot installations to $15 million capital campaign projects, that has been my journey and my work. And I'll turn it back over to you, Eric.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, such impactful work. I really appreciate you sharing that. And you were a great host. I came out to see, you know, it's almost like, is this true? Is it really? Could that really happen? And I came out, and then sure enough, all those pieces are in place, or are in the case of the park, they're getting ready to be in place. So I've seen it with my own eyes. The impact is very real. And I want to appreciate too, right? I mean, this is something that's important to you, and it's authentic to what you bring. And in fact, I mean, when I visited you, you showed me your house, which was in the Mount Vernon neighborhood.
Yeah, I live there.
Appreciate what you bring.
Those are my neighbors.
Yes. So, and something to me that I think has just been really impactful that as I've learned about your story there is, you know, I think that again, at every step of the way, you're doing with community, right? Not to or for, and that's harnesses and unlocks, unleashes, or like the local capacities, which is amazing. And in the process, right, you got this arc, right? Starting with those a small park, and then we realize, hey, we've got the power to create the future they want. And so we move up to an amphitheater. Takes a little more work, but we can do that because we've built that pocket park, right? And all the way up, capacity being built strategically by engaging the community process, leading to now really big projects coming into play because partners are also being built, partnerships and stakeholders, and relationships are being built. So I think that arc is just super powerful part of the story. Now, I don't know if you want to share anything about that, and or if you want to move into, right, in your case, you've taken that experience and then you've brought that in now, become a neighborhood planner with the city of Fort Wayne, and you're actually helping to inspire multiple neighborhoods to get activated and started. So I don't know if you want to say anything more about the experience, the weaving together of ABCD of design and working with community, or if you'll move into your Fort Wayne story. Either way, take it where you want.
Right on. So I think, I mean, we did end up weaving a lot of philosophies together at Bridge of Grace. My coworkers and I jokingly call it like the Bradley approach. It's taking a design thinking approach. And for people who are, if you're familiar with the scientific method and process of just testing and understanding and trying and coming up with hypotheses and things like that, that's more or less what design thinking is. I've noticed that different professions pull that same process and jargon into their own profession, and they all give it more different words, but it's all the same thing. From IDEO's perspective, step one, there's 4 steps. So 1 is inspiration. So that's understanding your community, doing research, gathering input from the neighborhood, but not just data, but also those qualitative conversations and such. The second big piece is ideation. So that's just concept generation. The third is implementation. And that one has a feedback loop. So you implement, you see if the stuff you wanted to happen happened. And then if it didn't, you try again. If it did, great, you start to scale that up. I recommend implementing small at first, trying out different components. and then growing that into a larger initiative. And the fourth is investigation, which is a part that a lot of folks miss. So yes, again, did you accomplish what you set out to? But then what were the longer term outcomes and implications? One thing I encourage people to do is use resources that exist that already are tracking data. So for us, Fort Wayne Police Department obviously is already tracking crime data. So if we're doing things that are supposed to impact crime, we just check in every year to see what our crime data is, and if we're having the impact that we thought we would or should, and if things are tapering off. For 1 or 2 years we stagnated a bit, and we're like, well, what's going on there? And we try to figure that out. So that's philosophy number one. The second is 3DM, which I mentioned, which is really just growing community leaders. So starting with I Do You Watch, proving your capacity, moving on to I Do You Help, giving people an opportunity to dip their toe in the water. Then you do, I help. So helping people to transition into positions of leadership. Then you do it, I cheer you on, right? So hopefully creating more community leaders in the process. So we've had neighborhood residents become leaders of our projects. We've had them take on running events. We've had one become a board member at Bridget Grace. Anyhow, and then I think those were the big three, right? And then asset-based community development, really leveraging our strengths and reframing liabilities as opportunities is massive. So seeing our vacant lots, yes, they're blighting influences. They're also spaces that can become really great gathering spaces for our community, right? Yes, these tires are a nuisance, but how do we flip that nuisance on its head and make it into building materials? Yes, vacant teenagers can feel problematic, but if we feed them with programming and creative space, they can become incredible advocates of our community, right? So those are our big philosophies. But then, yes, Eric, you're right. I didn't mention much about my current employer. I've been working at the city of Fort Wayne for 2 years now. And a lot of that work has been based on trying to replicate and scale up some of what we were doing in the Mount Vernon Park neighborhood. So beginning to equip and mobilize community leaders within, I don't know what my sound is doing, within the city of Fort Wayne, and to develop curriculum frameworks to help with that, and resources as well. So that's been my shtick. So kind of going back to starting at the beginning with some of our neighborhoods. So going back to listening, but instead of listening to one neighborhood, listening to 3, listening to 5, and leading those community leaders through that process so that they can understand what it looks like to conduct a listening tour, to host community engagement sessions that are called block parties, and include all the block party stuff, but still pull input and gather resources in the way of energy and people and momentum from those neighborhoods, so that all our neighborhoods can start to have some of the outcomes that we saw in Mount Vernon Park. Did I answer your question, Eric?
Oh, yeah, perfect, yeah. And I don't know, we did drop it, I will let people know we did drop in the chat, and we'll have a couple of links for you where you can go and learn about the FORT-ify Neighborhood Accelerator
Sure.
model. So while Rena's talking about this, click on those links so you can get access to those additional insight into how it works. Yeah, Rena, I don't know if you care to dig more into that. Maybe share some of details of the FORT-ify Neighborhood Accelerator, how that works for you in Fort Wayne, and I think in the middle of your second, right?
Yeah, so I will do another quick presentation for you guys. No cool videos with this one, unfortunately. But let me go ahead and share my screen with you again. Video. Can I exit? Hold on. Okay, there we go. Get rid of you. And let's pull up presentation number 2. There we go. So in short, the FORT-ify Neighborhood Accelerator is one of the means that we're using to try to replicate that process of taking an asset-based community approach within our neighborhoods and equipping neighborhood leaders. Start at the beginning, there we are. And equipping neighborhood leaders to do the work of energizing their neighborhoods themselves. So we don't want to necessarily build reliance upon us or dependency upon us as city staff. For context, there are 456 neighborhoods in the city of Fort Wayne. By contrast, Detroit has 88. I think Chicago has 65. So we have a ton of neighborhoods and we have 5 staff people to serve all 456. So as much as we can equip and mobilize and just help provide resources and support to our neighborhood leaders, we do that. So FORT-ify, a lot of the ethos of FORT-ify is wrapped up in this quote, that when we do change to people, they experience it as violence, but when people do change for themselves, they experience it as liberation. So we try to create an atmosphere and a space where our neighborhood association leaders can understand frameworks of listening, what it looks like to provide testimonials, what it looks like to pursue their own funding, so that they can push forward, create the vision that they want to pursue in their neighborhood, and then bring it to that is the quote I was looking for on this slide. This is another project I did, but the question is really, what if there was more access, more leaders, more resources in more neighborhoods? How would that help change in the city of Fort Wayne? FORT-ify is brand new. I just want to say that on the front end. We had our pilot year last year, and this is our 2nd year of operation. So I can't tell you what like the 10-year outcomes of equipping neighborhoods in Fort Wayne looks like yet. But Eric, if you put a pin and you follow up with me in 8 years, I'll be happy to share our results of how it transformed our neighborhood. Question number 1 that I usually get is, what in the world is a neighborhood accelerator? I've never heard of that. You haven't heard of that because I made it up. So in short, a neighborhood accelerator is like a small business accelerator meets neighborhood associations. So we provide education, we provide mentorship, we provide financing on neighborhood association, and give them this rapid, immersive, experiential learning style education about running a neighborhood. A lot of our associations are on a continuum in Fort Wayne. So there's some that aren't quite organized, and those neighborhoods usually engage themselves in an NSA program. So that's just helping you get up and start. Then there's a contingent that's working really well. They just need funding and resources from us. So we help them do that. But in the middle are the FORT-ify neighborhoods. So the neighborhoods that just need help developing, getting on their feet, establishing their bylaws, understanding where funding comes from. And that's who we're targeting here. So those, we call them launching, relaunching, developing neighborhood associations, who don't necessarily want to take 18 months to do a long-term plan, but really want to develop a quick action plan to get up and running fast. Outcomes of our programming. So we provide workshops. There's 4 workshops over the course of 4 months. And then our neighborhoods work with staff to co-create their quick action plan. So they're planned for the next 3 to 5 years. They get a new logo and branding, block party funding, which again is community engagement event, somewhat in disguise, with free food and entertainment. One-on-one coaching with city staff for up to 2 years. And then relationship building with other associations engaged in the program. We partner our association members with expert citizens, so people like myself who are trained in architecture and community development, also lawyers, accountants, city council members, et cetera, with our citizen experts. So expert citizens, subject matter experts meet citizen experts, which are our neighborhood association residents. I like to say that people have a PhD in their own neighborhood. You know that community better than I ever could. And that was a big part of me working on that Southeast Fort Wayne neighborhood that I mentioned earlier, is that I didn't just work there, I lived there, right? So I had a vested interest in that community and knew and loved the people there. So this is what that looks like. Last year, we had about 40 folks, I think, ish, that joined us. And then our neighborhood association members themselves who completed that slate. We talked about this a bit, workshops, activities, et cetera. One thing I didn't mention is that once our neighborhood association members do their workshops, they then put that learning into place immediately in their neighborhoods. So for example, in April, we talk about asset-focused community development strategies, and then our neighborhoods plan their listening tour. In May, we talk about governance and succession, and then our neighborhoods refresh their bylaws and their bank accounts and their legal structure. When we talk about civic engagement, we have our folks begin to draft their block parties so we can get, and fundraising and grant writing dovetails right into them being provided a funding opportunity by us, so they can start that process and hopefully leverage some of the funds into additional projects. This is an image. At the very end, I require that our association members present the outcomes of their FORT-ify experience. So this is Brett presenting at our neighborhoods conference, which had 150 people in attendance, about her experience with FORT-ify in her neighborhood. That's us coaching our residents. And then we also provide funding at the big tail end. So if our neighborhoods meet all the requirements of the accelerator, which in short is making sure that 3 to 5 of their folks show up every month and that they complete all the activities that they've been assigned, they receive funding. Last year it was $7,100 per neighborhood. This year, I think it's going to be over $7,500 per neighborhood. Thank you to our sponsors. Love them. In order to implement projects from the quick action plan that they developed. So the priorities that they developed with us and from listening to their neighborhoods are the ones that they can take action on. I think we're the only funding source in the city that helps out with creating a legal entity for neighborhoods, so non-concrete projects are applicable. And this is just eligibility, but you know, they can use funds to get directors and officers insurance. They can use funds to host events. They can use funds to create neighborhood infrastructure like domains, website hosting, etc. These are some of our fine folks who participated last year. The front 3 are some of our city council members. The neighbors are all looking a little nervous because I had them give their testimonials that they drafted earlier in the session right to our city council members at the end of the session, and they did awesome. And this is what some of our activities look like. Our residents contributed a great deal of their time that we'd value at over $5,600 as their in-kind contribution. And we saw really great outcomes. I'm going to scroll through these. You can see that we created binders. It was very professional looking. But we saw increases in their confidence and understanding different subject matter areas, up to 82% for one session overall, and over 121% in one category in particular, which was fundraising. Things were well rated. People said wonderful things about the program. I'm not going to read their quotes. I'm just going to scan through this, and you'll see like our schedules on this. This one was shocking to me. Gret actually said she was motivated after the governance session, which I thought was going to be the driest one. And she's like, yeah, legal structure. So go Gret. People did really well practicing their presentations. And then this is the one where we had that 121% increase in understanding of sponsorships. A lot of people are familiar with how complex those can be. Order, they require less documentation, use some of the funding amounts. Sorry about these guys, but their understanding increased there quite a bit. Each of our neighborhoods in our pilot got a brand new website that they can not only use to share the story of their neighborhood with others, but also use to collect their dues digitally. So they can now send out a link and text everybody that link to pay their dues rather than just accepting cash and checks. And they can use this platform to send out e-newsletters as well as SMS notifications about their neighborhood. So a lot of folks have told us that, you know, the last minute warning right before somebody has dinner, like at 5:30 to say, hey, the association meeting is happening, gets a reasonably good number of people to kind of switch paths and get over to the association. That's the website for our second video. It's something very similar in nature. And then I just pulled some slides about what our listening tour results kind of looks like. These are some numbers. These are the types of surveys we put out. Engaging those youth. tracking their understanding of their community. A lot of people didn't know that crime in their neighborhoods were actually decreasing year over year. So we had them fill out a quiz and let us know, is it decreasing? Is it increasing? And a lot of them would circle increasing and then learn something about the neighborhood during our block party and circle decreasing. And then we help them understand what their assets are. I produce a lot of beautiful pie charts. Here's an example of that breakdown. And then this is an example of like a jam board that we did with the neighborhood to determine their priorities. So for East Central, their first priority was establishing 501c3 status, then doing community pride projects, so like cleanups. After that, it was pilot projects, like a SEPTED project. So SEPTED is crime prevention environmental design. So they wanted to install lighting on a certain street on private properties in order to help deter crime in our communities. And we've seen results. We've seen crime reduce like 40% over just a few years from doing something similar in other neighborhoods. Priority 4, priority 5 is marketing material. Our total investment was about $20K per neighborhood. This is that breakdown. A lot of it was in their grant, and then in branding and websites, because you had to pay some consultants to get that done. And then bonus, our public art commission was so jazzed about our neighborhoods that they decided to do a project with them as well once they graduate. So each neighborhood is getting a brand new temporary art installation this year that's ramping up to some installation next year. And same kind of MO, walking them through the process so that they can understand how to do future installations. So East Central is getting a sound walk. It's like this app. You can hear the history and culture of the neighborhood and neighborhood. And then Harvester is doing a community movie night. And they have an artist who's producing a documentary of the neighborhood that they're going to debut the community night. Our next steps are that we're currently working on formalizing a curriculum. We've had a few folks, including Eric, reach out to us to say, well, can you do this in neighborhoods all around the state? And because I work for the city of Fort Wayne, I cannot. Our taxpayer dollars have to go into our city residents. But we are working on formalizing that curriculum so that other communities can use it, can take advantage, can use it with their own neighborhoods. And hopefully that'll be done in 2025 or 26. So that is the FORT-ify.
Yeah, amazing. Just love that. What an impactful model by the numbers that you shared, as well as testimony. And we had testimony here in the chat, actually. Let's see. Margaret says, I can testify as one of the neighborhood leaders and beneficiaries of the FORT-ify curriculum, a truly rich model to learn resources, processes, and community development opportunities. So shout out to you on that from Margaret. I'm going to turn it over to some questions that we've got in the Q&A box, and folks, feel free. This is the time. We've got about 15 minutes left, so this is the time. If you've got questions, to drop those in the Q&A box at the bottom here. And let's see, I guess to start off, I want to take advantage of being in the position I am to ask you the first question, which is, I just like to know from folks, from these sort of like luminaries, experts in this field, like for somebody watching in and saying, I'd love to do something like that in my community or in my neighborhood. What's my first step, right? So if you could help us unpack a little bit, where would you get started if as a neighborhood or as a community in moving into this kind of a accelerator space? And you're on mute, I'm sorry. Oh. So if you could unmute.
Sorry, guys. I was having a whole conversation with you, got a whole hug in there and everything. So when it comes to like where you start, and this might sound oversimplified, but I just recommend that everybody start where you are with what you have. So have a really good understanding of your resources, who and what is available to you. Because something like undertaking a community listening tour of 1,000 people, if you're a team of one, is going to be really tough. But if you say, okay, I am a team of one, I need somebody with a copier, churches, libraries, etc., are really great about that for community work, even your local city. If you know what resources you need, you can then begin to cultivate and develop those resources and make them. But things as small as a trash pickup, if you can understand an urgent need in your community, if you can talk to 5 of your neighbors and say, man, what do you wish we could just do? Oh man, all these weeds are crazy, but I can't do it by myself. 5 people isn't by yourself. So giving people those opportunities to have small wins is fantastic. Again, our efforts went all the way up to that $15 million capital campaign, that $18 million capital campaign because of COVID. It started with trash pickings, just galvanizing people and building. So I recommend starting small and with the folks that you have.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, let's turn to what's in our chat here. And we have a question that says, with your experience with resident engagement and youth, how do you help neighborhood associations navigate intergenerational work?
I love that one. I mean, part of that is understanding what appeals to different age groups, So I have this whole graphic that I didn't lump into that presentation where it's just like people, I'll call them the more mature members of our neighborhoods, tend to be folks that gravitate more towards strategic planning. They'll engage over longer periods of time for short periods of time. Okay, what I mean by that is they'll do the 1-hour meeting every month for years. The younger crowd, at least in our community, will hang out with you for a whole week for 8 hours a day if it means that they can see concrete outcomes of the work. So I don't necessarily try to get the 13-year-old to come to a neighborhood association, right? But if there are younger kids that have expressed an interest in building and design and pocket parks and creativity, I can lean into that, get the more mature members of the neighborhood to help me plan and strategize and figure that out, and then implement with the kiddos. So, put a round peg in a round hole, put a square peg in a square hole. And same thing with your marketing to those groups to reaching them. I'm not a TikToker. Really, the dancing isn't quite my thing yet. But when I try to reach out to our youth, I make sure I'm going through our schools, through our high schools, using what social media I can that fits their age and demographic. And when I'm reaching the other crowd, for meetings and such, it's still the newsletters, maybe the e-newsletters, Facebook, that kind of thing. So understanding your audience is super important, and giving people opportunities to lean into their strengths and those processes is important. Because then, if the youth are implementing something that the older members of the neighborhood helped vision, but then the youth helped still shape, they're out there giving the kids lemonade. They're out there telling them good job. And all of them are out there once the project is built because they all feel ownership of it. So that's one way to start to build those intergenerational opportunities.
I like that, right? Building ownership across the board as well in the process, and that really is the fuel, right, for this work. Jennifer Chamberlain has a question. Do neighborhoods need to find or have a fiduciary to be part of the program and access funds? And maybe you could even unpack a little bit, and that's something that's, I think, unique as well to the accelerator. That's one of the discussions you have. What is it that you're looking to achieve? What's the legal structure that's going to help you get there?
Right. So the answer is maybe. It depends on the legal structure of the neighborhood and if they have one. So for if your neighborhood is seeking larger funding opportunities like grants from foundations, so those are usually going to be $2,500 and up, then you'll likely need to have some association with the 501c. So either your neighborhood itself can be the 501c3, or you can be affiliated with a fiduciary who has 501c3 status, or some other nonprofit status. Some churches are 501c3s and 501c4. Local community foundations will often help out with that kind of. In our community, I usually encourage neighborhoods, if they plan to do that a lot, to seek 501c3 status themselves. And it's not as hard as you think, especially if you have a friend who's an attorney. A lot of attorneys are willing, frankly, and excited about the opportunity to give some of their skill set to the community. And they'll provide very discounted rates and or even pro bono service to help you, not to do it for you, but to help guide you through the process of filing your 501c3. There is a maintenance cost of that. I think our filing cost was something like $250, which can be a lot to a neighborhood or not, depending on what your structure is. Like HOAs, that's usually a drop in the bucket. But so yeah, I mean, that's my answer is it depends, but it can sure be helpful. Now, some organizations that provide sponsorships, and here's the secret: vast majority of organizations you encounter in your daily life provide sponsorships, from your grocery store to your resale store to whoever you buy gas from to whoever fixes your shoes. A lot of them have corporate giving, auto dealers, et cetera, et cetera. So some of those folks will require nonprofit status, but some don't. So reaching out to them as well, and just understanding the eligibility requirements can determine if you need a fiduciary as well. But again, those are usually $50 gift cards for your community rep, or a few cases of water from Kroger, or a donated cake, or smaller amounts, usually under $500. But a few sponsorships under $500 can get you a really nice block party.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, lots of ways to slice and dice. You mentioned HOA, just so people know, homeowners association, slightly different neighborhood association. Okay, we have another question. Danielle's asking, who maintains the neighborhood websites? So if you could speak to that. And I think too, if you don't mind, just take an additional minute to kind of help us, because I think that's part of communication strategy, but it's also part of identity and branding, right? That helps us to feel part of. Maybe just speak to the website's question, who maintains it, but then just share with us a little bit about how this, how you use that to help form identity, which yields, belonging and a lot of good things we want to see happen in neighborhoods.
Right. I mean, so much of our culture is internet-based at this point, right? Like, it's considered a national crisis when governments shut down access to internet because we just use it so much to navigate our daily life. For a neighborhood, so the website is part of our branding process. So we work with the associations, again, after conducting their listening tours, to say, what is the identity of your neighborhood? What is your logo? What is your motto? What is your vision, mission statement, all of that. And then the website, the look and feel of the website actually comes out of the branding, including colors, patterns, textile that came out of that branding process. And the intention, I do want to be very deliberate in saying this, because some people see branding as rebranding, right? Or as a means to market and sell the neighborhood to the people that you want to come there. And for us, we really see branding. Yes, it is informative to people who don't live in the neighborhood, but it's also a celebration of the folks who are there. And it's an opportunity for them to state their identity. This is who we are. This is how we want you to see us. And these are the strengths and assets that exist in our community, and what you will see more of when you come here. So thank you for that tag on question to Danielle's question. So Danielle's question is simpler to answer. We, as the city of Fort Wayne, one of the gifts that we gave our neighborhoods is that we paid for the sites to be registered and maintained for 3 years after this, with the intention that, honestly, our hope is that because the neighborhoods will have a much easier way to collect dues now, that's much more user-friendly and a much easier way to get the word on about their communities and spread awareness, that those websites will begin to pay for themselves after that 3-year point, hopefully well before that. So they'll have some funds in the bank by the time that 3 years is up. The format in which they were made is also very user-friendly. So our hope is that they'll be able to just pay for like maintenance of the domain and the site, and then take on the responsibility of making minor updates themselves. Harvester Neighborhood has already been making updates themselves. They've created their own events page and calendar. So they're really diving in there. But for 3 years, we have a consultant that's helping the neighborhoods out. And we're hoping that after that, they'll be able to transition to doing a lot of that themselves.
Excellent. I love how you're thinking about sustainability and all that, right? So what's built now has legs long after your involvement. That's truly admirable. We do have a couple of questions around churches and how churches are engaged. So Jay's asking about that on a general level, and then LW Durrell is asking about this. Apologies if I mispronounced that, but specifically, are we, Turner Chapel, in the East Central neighborhood in association with this work? So if you could share about churches, faith communities, engagement in this work.
So in general, so Bridge of Grace is a faith-based ministry that actually came out of a church. So my work in like capital C community revitalization began in churches, and churches can be a tremendous asset. You know, they have copying machines. I mean, like that may sound like a small thing, but if you're printing off 500, listening tour surveys, somebody that can run those off for you really fast and not charge you the prices that, I'm going to date myself, Kinko's or FedEx office, whatever they call themselves now, does, is a tremendous asset. Also, neighborhood cleanup. I mean, just churches can be so phenomenal, really phenomenal partners, including and I just want to say, not just for Big, obviously, but any faith-based organization that is aligned with the vision of seeing the community really come together and work together to get things done, or a nonprofit organization. If there's somebody embedded in your community that's invested in making it work with that. But I also recommend testing those relationships small, because you never know how a relationship will work until you really get in there, right? So take on small projects together. If it works well, keep going. If something doesn't work well, maybe adjust and see if you can find a way to better align with one another's interests. So, I mean, Bridge of Grace, that story I shared earlier, is like the story in my life of how a church can transform a neighborhood at the same time that it equips and mobilizes the people of that while they're sharing like the love. Right. So the second half of the other question, so part of the question is somebody local from Fort Wayne is on the call, and they're asking if their particular church is in a particular neighborhood. Call me. I'll look in a map because I want to be sure. I don't want to give you, I think I know the answer to that question is, I don't want to give you the wrong answer and tell you, yes, you're in that boundary and to be a street off. Or no, you're not, and to be a street off. So you can call 427-8311. That's the general number of the city, 260-427-8311, or email me. My email address is on the FORT-ify website, and I will look that up for you, and I will let you know. But churches can be phenomenal partners. I think my advice to the churches or any organization that's partnered with neighborhoods is to really come with an open mind of what the community wants to do, and to help support them, and to be honest about your own goals, so that the community can understand how you guys' goals are able to complement. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, I want to apologize because we're not going to get to all the questions. We are at time. But we'll continue to dig into these similar questions in future Bright Spots episodes. So let's stay connected. And again, drop us a question. We can try to answer that. Let's stay connected. Let's keep learning and growing together. And let's let's send up a lot of appreciation for Réna for sharing with us. These are powerful stories, powerful data, and we just want to thank you. Really impactful. Gosh, I want to
thank you.
Appreciate things that I've learned is just that idea of sort of like that design idea, right? So you find small projects, but make sure you integrate learning and reflection into that. And then that allows you to keep building to larger and larger things. So just grateful for all the nuggets of wisdom that you've shared with us and the stories to inspire us. So thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for attending today. We want to thank you. You are the community that makes this work. If we can do anything to be a support, that's what we're here for as an organization, Great Lakes Urban. And so you can find us through our contact, greatlakеsurban.org, and then there's a contact us page. Thank you all so much. I hope we can see you at our fireside chat. Don't forget to sign up for that before you leave here today. And again, let's stay connected. We'll send you the recording, and we'll send you new opportunities for additional trainings and Bright Spots episodes coming up. So again, thank you all so much. And I hope we wish you a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, guys.